On Colts Nation, we are going to talk about the first day of the combine, what this means for the Colts, and where the Colts should go in this year's draft. I have two picks that I would like to see the Colts go to based on who I think will be available at our beloved pick 15. The first one that I've seen the most common is Brock Bowers from Georgia. Brock Bowers plays 3 seasons with Georgia. He had 2,538 yards, 26 touchdowns, and Browers fits the typical pick for Ballard. Ballard picks very big guys, and Brower comes in before the combine. Obviously, combine starts today. Before the combine, he is 6'4", 240 pounds. That was obviously by the end of the season last year, which is pretty on pace for where Ballard drafts receivers and tight ends. He targets big boys. That's just what he does. That's how he's always picked his guys. Josh Downs was kind of an anomaly of picking a guy that was under 6 foot. He's drafted 8 wide receivers or tight ends since he started, and they've all been around the same size. Michael Pittman is kind of like your typical mold for how he picks wide receivers. This would fill an already pretty stacked tight end room, in my opinion. With you had Mo Alley Cox, Jelani Woods, and now Brock Bowers, who would be the smallest of the three, but I think he opens up a whole new dynamic for what you can run with an offense. I think that this opens up a lot of possibilities. You saw a lot of what Brower can do at Georgia. He really fit that offense really well, and if Steichen's going more towards that, keep Anthony Richardson in the pocket, give him some options, and also give him some protection. I think Brower gives you the best possible option in that dual threat, be able to block and to be able to have someone to throw it out. I really am hoping that Jelani Woods can come back and have a really good season to kind of mirror that as well. But we saw it last year. Richardson and Minshew both really heavily targeted the tight ends. A lot of the big explosive plays that we saw towards the mid to the end of the season were to the tight ends, were to some guys that you've never even heard of, like Mallory. You saw these guys that have, to some degree no business being there, make these really good plays. So I think giving a guy like Brock Bowers to Anthony Richardson would be really good for his development and could be really good going forward. The pick 15 is not a fantastic pick. It's not one that people are eyeing all over. And a lot of the players that are projected to go early in the draft are where the Colts would need. Got Marvin Harrison projected at number 3 now with a trade. There's a lot of projections going on, but there's not a lot of people that are saying there's not a lot of movement at pick 15, so it's not really, I don't really know what you could get for this pick. So it's not really super beloved, but we've seen some really good players come out of that, like pick 15, pick 16. Kwity Paye was like pick 11 a few years back. So you see some good guys come from around that area. The most recent one that I've seen, Mel Kiper came out with his as of today. His most latest was Terrion Arnold, defensive back from Alabama. The Colts saw really good play from Juju Brents last season, who was the second or third round pick in the draft. And so I think that that's the direction they need to go. They need help defensively. They at times were abysmal. They set the record in sacks, so their front seven really was dominant. They had really good play from their linebackers, really good play from their front four. Kwity Paye had a record season. You had Grover Stewart had a really good year when he was in. So you just saw a lot of really good play from those guys, but what needed was the defensive back. And Terrion, I think, fills a really big need. He's also very different than the typical cornerback that you see Ballard draft. Typically you had guys like Kenny Moore, who's 5'9", 5'10". Juju Brents was very small as well, but fast. And so I think this adds a lot. But he's a different than your typical cornerback. He played 2 seasons at Alabama. Last year alone, he had 5 interceptions. He had 4 solo tackles. Really showed up in clutch moments. I like this pick a lot. I'm hoping that this is where the Colts go, is towards this cornerback. I think that they need help at wide receiver. I'd love to see them. This is all pending that they sign Pittman and they lock Pittman up to a 3, 4, 5-year deal, which I think we all want to see. But Terrion Arnold, I think, is a really good pick at this. I agree with Mel Kiper on this. His pre-draft size is 6 foot, even 196 pounds, so big dude for a cornerback. But I would really like to see coming out of the combine where his speed lines up. I think that's going to be really important. Because you want a guy that's fast. That was in the game against the Texans. That's where we got burned. We got burned because of really fast guys just blowing us up down the field. which I think that we don't want to see. But I think this would be a really good improvement to a young defensive back room. But I also think this puts even more pressure on Gus Bradley. I don't know where everyone else was. I think I would have liked to see a move from him, just because I felt like there were a lot of miscues and blown coverages last year that was based on play call and not based on your specific players, but based specifically on play call. Last year, the Colts ranked 21st in the league in passing with 3,842 yards allowed through the air, including a career game to P.J. Walker, of all people. So I think this is a very clear need that the Colts have, especially in this defensive back. So I would really love to see a guy like Terrion Arnold to fill in this. They ranked 24th in points per game with 24.5. I think that this is where you go in the draft. I think defense, defensive back, and wide receiver are the clear needs in this draft, especially if you want to help Anthony Richardson going forward. You don't want him to have to make these crazy explosive plays unless you really want him to have the cards on the table and not be forced into these really bad situations where you have to score every drive. You want him to be able to develop, I think, in a different way than that. So this is where I'd like to see the Colts go. Either Brock Bowers or Terrion Arnold, I think, would be absolute locks. I've also seen people say the wide receiver out of Florida State, Keon Cole, would be a really good pick too. So this is what I would like to see, but that's just my take. Let me know in the comments what you think and where you think the Colts need to go in this year's draft.